this semester. So myself and my colleague Bryony, who's also a learning developer, have been working on this project. So I'm just going to talk through some of our findings around discovering how students are using generative artificial intelligence tools for academic writing purposes. So following on from a piece of research that we did last year, where we found that students were indeed using GAI tools to assist in their assignments, we wanted to get a bit more clarity and a bit more information about how students are choosing to use these types of tools, which tools they're sort of preferencing and which tools they're choosing, and also their levels of confidence and proficiency in using these tools. So this semester we planned a user experience study to produce a bit of a clearer picture of the processes that students follow when faced with essay-based assignments and try to understand some of their reasons for their decision making. So in order to find participants for our research, a survey for students to express their interest in taking part was created using JISC online surveys. We had an incentive of £30 Amazon vouchers for students who were eventually chosen. This was purchased through Alden HE funding that we applied for. The survey was open for 2 weeks at the start of semester 2 this academic year and promoted via an announcement sent to all students via RVLE, and we use Canvas at Liverpool. This survey asked students their name, email, school, level and year of study, and we also asked them for their confidence in using GAI tools. So just a basic rating from 1, not confident at all, to 5, very confident. We had 948 students complete our expression of interest survey. So in order to choose 30 to actually participate in our research and receive the vouchers, we exported the responses and then sorted our spreadsheet by level of confidence. For our 30 students, we wanted 6 students from each of the 5 levels of confidence to take part, so we simply used an online number generator to randomly select from each confidence category. So we had 14 participants from our Humanities and Social Sciences faculty, 8 from Health and Life Sciences, and 8 from Science and Engineering, 20 undergrads, and 10 taught postgrads. So for the participants who took part, they came to the library for an hour-long research slot. The students were all logged into a laptop that we provided and watched a short video that explained our study. Each student was then given 3 essay questions to choose from relating to their subject area, but told they only needed 1 to focus on within the session, so they could choose which one they liked best. They were then given 50 minutes to research their topic, use and make notes from any sources as they normally would, and put together an initial plan for their chosen essay. Everything they did was recorded using our screen recorder, so we've got Canvas Studio, and they were encouraged to sort of narrate the process and talk through what they were doing and why. They were informed that for any part of the process, if they deemed it useful or appropriate or what they would normally do, they could use GAI technologies if they wished. Once the slot was complete, the recording was saved and the students were given their voucher, and the recordings were then reviewed by myself, Bryony, and we have 3 student partners that work with us. So we reviewed the recordings and made detailed notes about the processes the students followed. So that all sounds very simple, but there were definitely challenges. The main challenge was that students didn't always reply to the email inviting them to participate, or not showing up at all for their project slot, even though they had accepted it. So each time this happened, we randomly selected another participant to replace them with the same self-reported GAI confidence. And this happened 35 times, so there was definitely a lot of admin involved in getting to the point where we had 30 recordings. We did also have 1 student who lost part of their recording. They somehow managed to pause and restart a new one. So that was one where we couldn't track their process all the way through. And watching the recordings was quite time consuming, so each student gave us 50 minutes worth of recording. They probably each took about 2 hours to work through, and we double reviewed several of them to ensure we were being consistent. 21 of the 30 students, so 70%, used GAI in the planning and researching process. And 7 of the students chose to use more than one GAI tool. And there was correlation between the confidence in their GAI that they self-reported in their sort of survey when they were applying, and whether or not they chose to use it. So the higher their confidence, the more likely they were to choose to use it within the study. We can see here that ChatGPT was by far the most popular tool that was used. So 18 of the students, so just over 85% of those who did use GAI, choosing to use this. There were other technologies used, and some of these we hadn't heard of before, so it was interesting to see which technologies they were choosing. But obviously there has definitely been the most sort of press around ChatGPT, and this was the one they were all sort of naturally leaning towards. So students chose to use GAI in a variety of different ways, with 15 of our students using it in more than one way throughout the entire process. So the table here categorises the uses into 9 different purposes and shows how many students chose to use it for this reason. There was also a strong correlation between the students' self-reported confidence and the number of ways they chose to use GAI throughout the process. So we can see here the most popular reason being asking for explanations, examples or definitions, closely followed by asking the tool to generate a plan or a structure. There were also students asking to paraphrase or reword their own work that they had written, or recommending sources that they could follow up on and read. So these were just some examples of the prompts that we came up across when we were going through the recordings. So we've just put some examples on the slides here, so we can see the types of things they're asking and how they're sort of wording those prompts to the GAI tools. So these were some of the most popular ones, so asking for examples, asking it to draft a plan or a structure, asking it to rewrite something and making it a bit more clear, concise or formal, and generally just asking for sources. A few more prompts here. So these were some of the students who asked the tool to actually write a section of the essay, asking for some feedback. So if they'd written a plan, asking what do you think of it. And we had a couple of students asking for it to generate some prompts or alternative terms that they could use in things like Google Scholar, or asking for help with how to reference a specific source. Of the 21 students who chose to use GAI, 12 of those indicated that they were aware of its limitations. Now, we hadn't actually asked them to talk about that when they were sort of commenting, so these were just sort of comments that they chose to make while they were doing their planning. So there were quite a few people that, as they chose to use the tool, explained to us verbally what their sort of hesitations might be about using the responses. So people saying things like it's a good starting point, but they wouldn't trust everything it says. Knowing that ChatGPT can entirely invent stuff, as we just saw in Adam's presentation. Always making sure that they would reread something and rather than just sort of following it blindly. And someone saying that they knew that if you use ChatGPT to just write an essay, that you would fail because it doesn't really give you enough, but it's useful for creating an outline. So there were quite a lot of sort of awareness amongst our participants of some of its limitations. Now this research project was really about use of GAI, but we actually ended up with a lot of other really quite interesting information. So one of those things that we were interested in when we sort of went through the recordings was where students were actually choosing to search. So in terms of actually starting their searching, Google was definitely the most popular choice, with 9 of our students starting their search here, and only 6 of the students actually began the process in a GAI tool. So Google, followed by Google Scholar, were the most popular options. So that was starting their search, and this table shows results for sort of searching throughout the whole process. So the different places that students chose to perform their search throughout the whole 50-minute slot. And again, Google is right up at the top there with 16 students searching it at some point. Equal to Google Scholar, again 16 students using that. 14 of the students actually only used one resource to search for information throughout the whole allocated slot, so nearly half. And 6 of the students chose to go via the University Library search or the University Library website to find their resources. So interesting to sort of see the search patterns that students were following, even though that wasn't really sort of an intended objective of our study. Also quite interesting was looking at some of their searching techniques. So we had 22 students searching using keywords, and 16 students sort of editing their search, replacing some of the terms, as we often teach them in those sort of types of information literacy sessions, if their initial search didn't really bring back what they were hoping for. We did have 8 of the students simply type their question or the majority of their question straight into their chosen source to get results. And 11 of the students used some sort of filtering, whether that be date or filtering for things in a certain language when they were searching. And 8 of the students used at least one example of Boolean techniques throughout their process to join their sort of search terms together. Now some students, as they were searching and they were sort of narrating their process, did comment on how they would actually decide whether a source was worth reading and actually using in their essay. So again, we found this really interesting. So the table here just summarises some of their thought process and how they decided what they were going to read in more depth. So lots of students were preferencing skim reading a section. So for example, a lot of them use journal articles, so they'd look through the abstract and make quite quick decisions as to whether they wanted to commit time to read that in full, or they were just going to move on and find something more appropriate. We can see here some of the other techniques they were using. A lot of them would quickly search a document using Control and F to search for some of the words that they thought would be useful. And they definitely put some thought into what they've seen their lecturers use and what they've seen come up before, perhaps in reading lists. So looking for sources that perhaps they thought seemed familiar. In terms of actually referencing sources, obviously we only asked them to put together a plan. We weren't asking them to write a full essay. And 80% of the students included some form of references in their essay plan. That number goes down a little bit to 14 of those students who actually matched the reference to the information. So lots of students would write the information down and then just put like a list of links right at the bottom of their document, so it wasn't really clear what was coming from where. So 14 of them did consistently put the reference next to the particular notes that they made, which obviously would hopefully help them avoid any accidental plagiarism as they go along. Interestingly, of the students who did use GAI, whether that was to get definitions, explanations, or actually to write them a section, none of the students did actually create any sort of reference for any of the GAI tools that they chose to use throughout the process. So in terms of our next sort of steps and what we're planning to do with our research, the university's generative artificial intelligence guidance is changing constantly, as I'm sure lots of people are having the same things happening at their university. So we're trying to make sure that we contribute to that so that it is informed by our research and that people have got sort of an understanding of how students are using these tools and what potentially should be going into that guidance. This summer we're spending quite a bit of time on editing our academic skills sessions and our online tutorials to try and provide some relevant guidance on being aware of some of the limitations, but also on how to maximise the usage of GAI. We also want to try and promote tools other than ChatGPT, which was obviously hugely the preferred choice by students, but does have a lot of issues. It's not connected to the internet, the version that our students were using. So we want to raise awareness of other tools, perhaps such as Copilot, and some of the advantages of these. We found out quite a lot about how students are searching, and definitely seeing that their main preference was using Google and Google Scholar. So we do want to consider editing some of our search techniques type sessions to sort of teach students how to use those tools a bit more appropriately, as well as, of course, promoting the tools provided by the library. And we found this process really interesting, like watching the recordings and really getting that insight into what students are doing and a little bit of insight into why. So we are hoping to do a bit more research next academic year. I'm really interested in seeing the next stage, so we looked at the plan, but I'd be very interested in seeing like, the actual writing stage, if it was possible. And we've also got quite an interest in thinking about how students with disabilities maybe use GAI, and if there are any sort of differences in how they would approach